Hi, I'm Madison McComasky and I'm from Sydney, Australia. I came to NTCC to play soccer, but as we could no longer play in the spring, I shifted a lot of my energy to the study of American intellectuals in the 1930s and their relation to American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism was a term that Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin both used and mocked. He claimed that the cultural resistance of communism in America was false, that Americans were not exceptional, and they would eventually see the virtue of communism. I looked at intellectuals who seemed to follow Joseph Stalin's prediction in the 1930s. Journalist Lincoln Stevens, writer John Dos Passos, and philosopher John Dewey were all following the call of Stalin to critique the terrors of capitalism. They all moved left, and it looked like these influential Americans would cause major disorders and reforms in the United States. Then a ricochet set in that Stalin had not predicted. They could not resist individual freedom and turn right. They underwent congenital individualism. This is a term that I use to highlight the tendency of American individuals to unconsciously embrace the American ideology of exceptionalism. The first intellectual, Lincoln Stevens, was an investigative and muckraking journalist in the Progressive Era. Stevens believed the two most corrupting factors in American cities were capitalism and domination, and wanted to eradicate the deep-rooted pool of corruption. I've seen the future and it works. The famous words Stevens said in 1921 after meeting with Vladimir Lenin in the Soviet Union and seeing the victory of the Bolshevik Revolution. Stevens then experienced congenital individualism as he started to reject communist principles in the 1930s after there was a massive decline in muckraking journalism. His beliefs lost to most of his audience and then began to give him doubts of the effectiveness of communism if there were to be a reform in government. He believed that a reform purely destroyed the symptoms of corruption rather than its cause. The second intellectual, John Dos Passos, was a writer whose works were concerned for the equality of American life. In 1928, he visited Russia, where his writings were evidence that he adopted the basis of Marxist conceptions. He said, "The knot which our society must untie, the problem of controlling power over men's life of the stratified corporations, which whether their top management calls itself capitalist or socialist, are so admirably adapted by the pull of centralization to despotic rule." He believed the government was blind in seeing the coercive power large businesses had on society. Dos Passos was involved in communist activities until 1934, where he began to see the true ruthless behavior of the party. He began to believe the Communist Party was concerned with seeking power rather than focusing on social reform. Undergoing individual freedom, he ricocheted as far right as possible, becoming a conservative and shocking everybody who knew him. The third intellectual, John Dewey, was one of America's most remarkable individuals. The beliefs of Karl Marx played a central role in his thinking. In 1928, he visited the Soviet Union, searching for a way to vindicate his beliefs. This then exposed his hope for Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik experiment. In 1925, he wrote that any liberalism which is not also radicalism is irrelevant and doomed. So filled with conviction, he had become a prophet of communism. However, after 1935, Dewey's beliefs went no further. This could have been a response to being investigated by the FBI. However, Dewey was successful in shifting the public eye away from his communist thinking through pragmatism and experimentalism. The truth he wanted to know most of all during the 1940s is that he was a brilliant and respected scholar. Insisting on continual experimentation of his new philosophies, he exhibited congenital individualism. It may seem from my survey that though Stalin was wrong to mock the term American exceptionalism, he was right to coin it. Indeed, there was a powerful cultural force that resisted communism in America, but Stalin was wrong in another sense. My return to Australia during coronavirus led me to study Australian intellectuals of the same time period. I found with the cases of Dorothy Hewitt, Jane Devaney, and John Anderson, they experienced the same ricochet and the same ultimate allegiance for individual freedom. The Australians too had visited Russia, and they were eager to overturn capitalism. They then saw treachery and rebounded far to the right. We see a connection between Stevens and Hewitt, as many of her writings involve communist ideals. She also experienced congenital individualism as she ceased all involvement with the Australian Communist Party, and just like Stevens, she lost most of her audience. Devaney was similar to Dos Passos, as they both contributed to communist activities. Ricocheting to the right, they were both disillusioned and publicly disregarded the party. Dewey and Anderson can be compared as they shared parallels in their philosophies. He then saw communism as coercive, wanting freedom. He ricocheted to the right, becoming a libertarian. Stalin at least was right in the sense he called attention to America's unique tradition with freedom. But he was also wrong to rule out other countries such as Australia, where leading intellectuals shared the same experiences with their American counterparts. Thank you.